I'm sitting with Jeremy Dauber here at the Miami Book Fair, and he wrote a book about the seriousness of Jewish comedy. How serious is Jewish comedy?
Well, I think, like a lot of comedy, Jewish comedy can be very serious business indeed. I think that it tells us a lot about Jewish history, Jewish culture, the way Jews have kind of made their way in the world through the ages. It's a real blueprint into the Jewish imagination.
How so?
Well, I think that what makes people in a given culture laugh tells a lot about their identity. It tells a lot about how they grapple with the vicissitudes of fate and with sort of historical circumstance and what they believe to be important and what they think they should probably knock down a peg every now and then. So by tracing kind of that story, I was able to try and say something about not only Jewish identity, but also why is it that so many different cultures have embraced Jewish comedy as part of their own story too.
In the last few years, political correctness has reared its head. Now, how do you create comedy about yourself and laugh at yourself if somebody in the audience says, you shouldn't be saying that, that's wrong?
Great comedy of any sort comes from the application of a particular circumstance, your own individual circumstances, to a kind of universal condition. So it's from your particular case, but it can speak to everybody. I do think, though, that in this atmosphere of really sort of thinking about who particular jokes are affecting and what have you, one of the questions is one of authority. Who has the authority to tell a particular kind of joke? And that's something that, as a society, we're really working out now, those questions of saying, well, is only someone who was in the Holocaust, for example, might be able to tell a Holocaust joke. Would that be all right if they tell it? Would it matter if someone else was in the audience who took it amiss?
Exactly.
Those kind of questions. And I think really as a culture we're grappling with them.
Do you think that there's still a chance that we can all laugh at ourselves and not worry about the political correctness?
I think that as long as people recognize that they're selves in the comedy, that is going to be the wellspring of a certain kind of laughter. Conversely, I think that often there are certain kinds of comedians satirists, for example, who take a look at the world and they say, this needs to change. I'm angry about this. And it may make me a person who looks like they're hectoring all the time, but, I have to get this out there. And that kind of need might, separates them from sort of the average person as well, who might say, yeah, it's terrible, but what am I going to do about it? Right. And I'm not going to turn it into satiric, edgy comedy. And with satirists in general, and in my book, I say this goes all the way back to the biblical prophets. It always crosses the line or tries to tread the line between being educational and being edificatory and being funny. And sometimes comedians or satirists fall on the wrong side of that line, whichever way it goes.
But that also enhances their brand, because then you either love them or hate them, but you're interested in what they have to say.
I think that's right. One of the most indicative lines that any satirist I think ever made was by one of the great satirists of the 20th century, Lenny Bruce, who said sort of towards the end of his career one night, he said something like, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but I wasn't very funny tonight, but I don't have to be funny. I'm Lenny Bruce, basically. I'm not, and he felt in some ways that personal brand that you're talking about, being Lenny Bruce and being a truth teller that way, was the most important thing. And audiences towards the end of his career disagreed. Yeah. I think that it's sometimes it's hard to separate those things looking back at his work. But in some sense, that personal engagement and passion was one of the things that made him shine so brightly when he did.
Well, you've read and heard probably thousands of jokes. Do you have a favorite?
I think one of the classic Jewish short jokes is the one about the mother who has a son and they're walking on the beach. I'm sure you know this joke, but they're walking on the beach and the son starts drowning in the ocean. And, the mother sort of raises up her hands and she prays unto God. She says, God, please help me, save my son. And all of a sudden the waters part and the son is brought back on a cloud of smoke and fire right to the woman's feet. And she looks up at the sky and she says, he had a hat. And I think there's something, often that joke is sort of told as a kind of Jewish mothery kind of joke. But I think there's more to it than that. I think that, one of the hallmarks of kind of Jewish theology, for lack of a better word, is this kind of comfort arguing and complaining with God. And there's this thing of the audacity of seeing a miracle and saying, look, that was fine, but, we need a lot. That is in some ways a very deeply kind of Jewish sensibility.
Well, I think that's really at the core. If you can understand the outrageous funniness of that last line, you understand everything there is about Jewish humor.
I think that's right. I think it's a very central kind of joke in that way, and so it's one of my favorites as a result.
I was told a long time ago, if you're going to leave the stage, leave with a joke. So thank you for your joke, and I want to thank you for coming. And this was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A real pleasure to be with you.
Before we leave, I just want to mention the book. Give us the name.
Jewish Comedy, A Serious History.
And you want to know something? It's not only serious, but it's also funny.